Bosh, do you support Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all those people?
Yes, I do, to varying degrees.
Do you know that Black Lives Matter is a far left liberal radical group that was started by radical black lesbians, fat black lesbians?
I'd heard all those rumors. It's what got me amped up to them for the most part.
Really? And what do you think about all the rioting and looting that they are doing and have done in America? Is that the right thing to do?
I think the rioting and looting isn't good, but I think we have to recognize, if we look through history, it's an inevitable product of a pent-up agitation that can't be expressed in other ways. As MLK said, riots are the language of the unheard, or, the last gasp of the unheard. I don't think they're good. I think we should make every effort to prevent there from being riots and looting in the future, which means addressing the problems that lead to those riots. Most, by the way, of these demonstrations are quite peaceful. It's like with BLM back in 2014, 2015, like the vast majority are peaceful protests, and then some of them get rowdy.
And so every time I see Antifa on the streets, they're hiding their faces, and they are very destructive and radical. If they believe that what they're doing is the right thing, why do they hide their faces?
Several prominent members of Antifa, several prominent protesters have been doxxed, targeted, and sometimes even murdered by far-right paramilitary groups in the past. After that, they developed the habit of hiding their faces. It's an effective tactic for avoiding reprisal. I can't say I necessarily blame them after what's happened to some of their compatriots.
Elijah, do you support Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all those people?
That's a good question. Well, number one, I don't support the organization Black Lives Matter. I think it's a deceptive title for an organization because it kind of sets you up to either A, agree Black Lives Matter, or B, be a complete a-hole and a racist. But Black Lives Matter is like a militant, far-left, Western deconstructive organization. I mean, they're pretty open on their website about trying to stop heteronormativity, aka push the queer kid stuff. They don't believe in the nuclear family. They want to run things based on tribes. I mean, I've read a lot of their bios too, and their support for abortion, et cetera. I don't think it aligns a lot with a lot of black people I know and I've met and I've seen tend to actually hold policy-wise a lot of conservative ideas in general. But obviously they vote Democrat, and I think BLM is much further left, and people don't realize that organization is really a genuine far left organization, which some people might love it even more. But and then Antifa, I mean, it's hard for me to know because it's not really like a linear hierarchical group. I mean, for most of the time, people always ask me on the ground, like, was that person Antifa or Antifa? And then they argue, is it Antifa? It's like, dude, look, you could I think it's just more like a horizontal organization with an idea. There are more organized groups, but here in Dallas, a kid wearing a black scarf. I wore a black scarf at the riot too. Am I Antifa because I put on a scarf, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know really. So I don't know. I just know in Portland and Seattle, they're a lot more organized, and I've seen them, and DC too. So
what does it mean, Black Lives Matter? Elijah, it doesn't seem to have any meaning. It doesn't mean anything. What is it supposed to mean?
Yeah, I've heard of quite a few. I think it's like a kind of a kiss up to be accepted, to tell people like Black lives, like we should be accepted into whatever system you want. But it confuses me too, because it's also trying to destroy the system and reimagine it. So it's like, do you want to be accepted into the current system, or do you want to destroy the system? And are you saying that only within a new system will Black lives actually matter? But I think that, your value has to come from, you tell your own value. You don't need, society or what you call white people versus people of color to accept you.
Right.
If you're black, you're valuable as an individual, as a human being. And there are certain definitely limits and limitations that come with being black. For sure, 100% culturally. I would say most of them are culturally in the black culture itself, not the system that's preventing them. But I think that Black Lives Matter just already puts that weird victim mindset in black communities that already like we don't matter to the world, when in reality, most people really have no problem with black people at all.
What do you say?
I'd like
to
to jump
Bosh?
in on that.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah. So as fun as it is to call them like a radical far left organization, most of the
radical
things that
far left organization founded by fat black lesbians, worse than the KKK.
As fun as it may be to call it that, it's pretty much just like a progressive organization. The stuff that you said, like fighting heteronormativity, I mean, that literally just means like preventing homophobia, acknowledging the fact that like gay couples can have kids or like adopt kids and have a healthy lifestyle. They fight for like racial justice and equality. Most of their platform positions, the Black Lives Matter organization, really are just boilerplate progressive ideas that have been more or less accepted commonly by about half of this country and in most of our country's educational institutions. So I don't think they're like, as speaking as an anarchist, I can say very concretely, I know for a fact the Black Lives Matter organization is not like far left. But they're good. And with regard to what you just said there, I think that Elijah, your sort of comments there kind of reified the reason why they call themselves Black Lives Matter. You said that Black people have problems culturally, but not institutionally. I won't deny that there are issues with Black culture, but institutionally, pretty much every available piece of data we have, including analyses and meta-analyses done by the federal government, confirm that there are indeed racial biases committed against Black individuals in this country in our criminal justice system. And that's just to begin with. The famous study done to show that if you have a Black name, you're much less likely to get hired. Studies done in the way people treat one another and inherent racial bias and in-group differences. These are all really well-studied phenomena. To deny these things, to tacitly deny reality, none of these are controversial sociological opinions, kind of suggests you have a motivated reason. There's a bias which drives you to deny the facts around like Black people and their mistreatment. And that does kind of make it seem like you think Black lives matter less. And I think that's the gist of what the movement is trying to get at. It's not just fighting against KKK members. That's easy. You know, we get it. They have the hoods. We know they hate Black people. It's the subtle and pervasive ways Black people's lives are made more difficult by systems that are extremely tough to reform without concrete action.
Yeah, no, I'll say, well, real fast. Sorry, Jesse. I'm just gonna say, that the case that you're making is one that can seem difficult to refute because you go, well, I mean, yeah, there are empirical studies that do show the certain implicit bias, but it's not exactly the system itself. It's not the certain law or this or that. It's like when you look at someone like, for instance, I've had a lot of Black friends who've talked to me about, getting racially profiled. But then you look specifically why people racially profile somebody. So when you look at crime stats, disproportionate amount of certain crimes based on the population density. Well, some of these biases and things develop based off of truth, and others of them don't. Some of them actually would be just cultural. But racism to me is a pride issue, and it's an issue because when you take down the skin, down to the heart, we are all the same. And people that feel like they're better than other people without giving them a chance, just because they have a skin color or assuming that they just are obliged or more likely, let's say, to default on a loan for a home because they're Black. Well, you have to really look in that area, in that region, and see, well, what is the turnover rate with credit scores and with people based off of race? And why did people develop these intrinsic biases? Why do they exist in our society? I am never going to deny the fact that I think that Black people very often are racially profiled specifically, but also I've had Black friends who came from, a married couple. They were socioeconomically doing well for themselves, especially friends that I had that immigrated directly from Africa. And they were kind of racist towards American Blacks too. And there is a different, they were, I mean, Nigerians are notoriously racist towards American Blacks, which shows you that it's not the color of skin.
I wouldn't call it racist.
Yeah,
the Black in America don't like anyone who does well in life. And so the Blacks in America are jealous and envious of the Blacks who come from South Africa, from Africa, period. And they say, oh, you think you're better than us because Blacks in America are losers, and they're jealous of anyone who succeeds.
Well, I can't speak to the turf war going on between African Americans and African Blacks, but the existence of interracial or intra-racial biases does not negate the existence of biases against the African American community. It sounds to me like you're almost implicitly justifying the treatment that Black Americans get by saying, well, hey, even Black Africans treat them that way too.
That's bullshit. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not justifying the treatment, though.
Wait. Well, that's what I read from your statement. But let me finish. If that's not the case, then that's fine. That's just what it sounded like to me. But you say it's not systemic, it's not law. I agree. Most laws in the book are pretty racially neutral. Maybe there are some edge case exceptions. It's more about very long-standing economic and social disenfranchisements, which compound into an existing bias today. For example, racial profiling. It's true, Black people commit more crime. per capita in this country than white people. So if you're going to create a profile for what the average criminal is in many cities, that person is probably going to look black, or at least they're going to be more black than is average for the demographics of that area. The issue is, if that's the profile cops use as the average criminal, they're going to disproportionately stop, search, arrest, or violate the rights of people who match that profile, which puts more people in jail than would be proportionally necessary. And whatever issues you had with the crime in that area get worse, because you cycle through the next generation of Black Americans, not fixing the problems that cause the criminality, only using bias as a justification to arrest them at higher rates.
You've been brainwashed. All of that's not true. Yes, they are not racially, but profiled because they're Black in many cases. That's because Black people commit most of the violent crimes. And when they are stopped, they give the cop attitude. And when they are stopped, they give attitude. They don't follow the instructions of the cop. And most of them are criminals, so they're trying to prevent getting arrested again. You don't have the decent Blacks acting that way in most of the time, but when I speak of disproportionate, I mean relative to their criminality, not just relative to their population. So when they're disproportionately arrested, I don't mean, well, they commit more crimes, so obviously. I'm saying even with the amount of crime that they commit, they still get arrested more. And when this bias isn't just with the police, it's also with the juries, the judges, the sentencing, the prison sentences. But they're trained to act that way, though. They're trained to not act decent. They're trained to not trust the cop.
While there may well be differences in the average behavior of people in different racial groups, that explanation does not explain the huge disparity there is in the criminal justice system.
Can I ask you something, Vosh? Because you're a really intelligent guy, and I can tell you think through things. And I'll be completely honest. We were mentioning earlier, I just moved. I am jumping from state to state at the moment. I'm in and out of a lot of things, and so I didn't even know really what this was, but I am very happy that you're on here, because I kind of want to bring up like this weird plate of there being almost two things that can be true at the same time, but also asking you, Will, which meal will actually give you the nutrition that will last long term? And when you look at the problem of saying, okay, yeah, there is racially profiling, and so then they police, but it's still not bringing any blame back to the Black community of going, well, but you're committing like I don't mind looking at the police and these things, but because the movements don't equally look at the real issue. So it's like, if we say Black Lives Matter, they go, well, yeah, sure. People go, if your house is not on fire and their house is on fire, why are you bringing up your house too? Because their house needs the fire to be put out. And I'm like, sure, the Black community's house is on fire, but it's not on the flames. It's like a spark is the police. But the main issue is internal. And when you go internal, you might actually find the real issues. Like we might actually end up agreeing more, because when you go internal and you go, okay, so why are Black people killing each other? Like 92% of these homicides are Black on Black. Why is there an attrition towards joining gangs in certain neighborhoods in Chicago? Why is there this inability that the Black community tells you when someone gets educated or begins to become eloquent or collegiate, that it's like, oh, why are you talking like a white person rather than why are you talking like a civilized, developed person in the Western world? Why is that intrinsic? Why are there ebonics? Why is the rap culture glorify things that are when you look at it are going to destroy individuals' lives? And if you go in there and you start to see systems in play, okay, well, this school and that school and there's funding here and there, I'm totally down for that. And I would love to look at ways that things can be reformed. But I think the weird part about it is that there's this external blame that all of Black people's problems are because of these systems that are not being reformed. And it's not only anti-Western, it's anti-Christian. And it's not really, I believe, what this country was. I don't believe it's what this country was built upon, which is this need as an individual to take responsibility for your own life. And I think that's what's been happening is more and more. I don't doubt any of the wrongs done against Black people in this country. But, what's really interesting is that when you look today, right now, the conversation is not a balanced conversation.
Right.
You have idiots on the right who are just saying, well, the Black people need to fix themselves. And you have idiots on the left going, it's the systems. Well, what if it's a combination of the two? And if you ignore either part and you don't find a synergy together, then you're never going to come to a solution, because if you always cast off towards outward reform, you're going to just end up fat and unhappy, or you're just going to end up just some pansexual person with no position or direction, which is fine. I don't mind. I don't care where you put your dick, but
okay, wait. We've got a lot to go over here. I don't know what social reform has to do with pansexuality. Yes.
Let me ask this before you respond. Isn't it nice to hear a logical white man speaking the truth without fear?
I hear a white man logically speaking the truth without fear every day I boot up my stream, Jesse.
Who is that? The
it's
Hake
nothing new to me.
Report? Would
It's
you
me.
listen to the Hake Report?
I speak of myself, Jesse.
The Hake Report guy has some questions for you guys in a minute here, but I want to get this in.
Yeah, we have to address these. So
Yeah.
this idea that there's no system for addressing the problems in the black community or that people aren't doing this is just wrong. Nobody acknowledges it, but it's happening. There have been myriad summits done on black violence, black leaders, including who's that one every conservative hates? He worked with.
But they
Barack
always
Obama.
blame the white man when they have
No,
the summit.
no. They don't.
blame
These are
themselves.
these are intra-racial conferences where they talk about what they can do to address their own community
But they
biases.
still blame the whites.
Gangster rap, for example, was very big on adulating criminality and anti-police sentiment. But the biggest consumers of gangster rap were white suburban teenagers. 82% back in 1993, when it was at its height, 82% of music sales done for gangster rap, the genre, were done in white suburbia, and the record labels that were pushing this music were largely run by white men. That doesn't mean black people didn't produce that music, but it means that the context in which these cultural tendencies are being developed are not ones exclusive to the black community. Why black and black crime? Well, largely because of the drug war and because black gangs fight over each other for turf to defend
it's
the drug.
because they have no moral character. They are full of hate. They have not been raised by good parents, and they've been brainwashed. More people don't do this type of looting and rioting that they've been doing and hating their fellow
White
man.
people loot and riot over sports games outcomes. As for black on black crime, the reason why, I don't know if there are any studies on how much hate is in the heart of a black person. I do know there are studies on what the drug war has done to black communities. When these black and black crimes happen, it's not because black people hate black people because they're all dumb or whatever. It's because they have a vested economic interest in defending the drugs that they sell to make a living in their impoverished neighborhoods.
You've been brainwashed, Bosh.